Okay. So, all right, yeah. So I'm also one of the developers of WordPress itself, the actual product. Um, and so I've been messing with some stuff lately, and Eric Lewis suggested I come and present it, show you what I've been working on. But right now we're in the middle of WordPress 4.0, which is going to release, I guess, in 3 or 4 weeks. And Eric's been working on that as well. WordPress 4.1, though, will start kind of in earnest, I guess, in like a month. And one of the things I'm really interested in is WordPress multi-site. Does anybody know what multi-site is? Basically how it works is you can have one WordPress install and you can create a network. Meaning, in its most simple form, WordPress.com. WordPress.com is one install of WordPress, but it has about 30 million blogs that run all in the same code base. There's 2 ways in a simple form that happens, and that's with either subdomains or with paths. Meaning, if I want to have scott.wordpress.com, that's going to be a blog in the network. If I want to have wordpress.com/Scott, and I'm using subdirectories as my virtual path, that's a blog in the network. There's also some more advanced things you can do where you can use something called domain mapping, meaning I can actually take any arbitrary host URL and still have it be in my network. So typically we start with the main site, and then you may have subsites or you may have verticals, and those subsites and verticals may be completely different, or they may share themes. It may actually be very similar. But what I'm interested in doing for 4.1 is really creating a better experience for developers of getting multi-site up and running. Because right now it's very code-based. It's not, a lot of the WordPress stuff is very admin and UI-based. But making it easy to kind of set these networks, making it easy to do the domain mapping portion, and also making it a little more streamlined to have open and closed sites within open or closed networks. What that means is that for any network you create, you can actually share users across sites. You can make registration available so that, for instance, I have a music blog here I started called Hi For This, which is really basically just a blog or like magazine type thing where I post content I like. I don't really want to open this up to users. Like, I don't need users to register. I potentially might want them to register so I could send them an email or have them sign up, be on a mailing list. But as far as like user generated content goes, I don't really want anything to happen on that. I do, however, have an interest in concerts. And this week I was working on kind of this little app, which I'll show you in a second, where I can go and record my concert history of concerts I've been to. And as soon as I did it kind of as a prototype, and as soon as I put it up, I had people saying, oh, how do I put my concerts in there? That'd be cool to like do the same thing. And then I started thinking, and I'm like, oh, wait a second, that would actually be pretty cool if you could do my concerts, your concerts, see where they intersect, etc. So when I started doing that, it was this. And this is kind of like a little PHP app I wrote. And I was serving it on the same domain. I just kind of put a folder in there. And I decided, really how this started, I was cleaning my apartment. And I found a big envelope of concert tickets I've saved. And I'm like, man, I don't need these tickets, but I do want to make sure I like record all of them so I know kind of what I've been to. In the past, too, every year, like for the past 5 years, I've done a blog post at the end of the year. It's like concerts I attended in, 2014, 2013, whatever. Because I go to like, 40, 50 concerts a year. So I input all of the tickets, and then I'm like, man, I could actually throw these away if I wanted to, because I actually, as long as this database stays in some sense of permanence. So I like exported it into GitHub. But so I did this thing. And so, this is, as the years go on, here are concerts and stuff. It also does some analytics. I can see which venue I've gone to the most times. I can see, yeah,
Terminal 5.
yeah. I can see which artists I've seen the most times, and this is over the years. So like, I haven't seen Dave Matthews Band in a while, but overall I saw him 12 times. It's like, I'm 34, and so like college, college was the end of the 90s for me, and I was very into Dave Matthews, right? What's interesting though is that I wouldn't have actually guessed that like some of these were at the very top. For instance, I just got into Phosphorescent last year, but because he's based in Brooklyn, I've seen Phosphorescent 7 times. As many times as I've seen my guitar hero, John Mayer. Okay? But, so this was like interesting to me to see, and then like, have all the years again, and I can do it per year. I can even click into like Music Hall of Williamsburg and see all the shows I saw there. Sharon Van Etten. And it was actually kind of fun to like go back and like really dig in my brain, like what have I seen live that I didn't have like actual evidence of. And so you go back to like, 98, I remember Mesky Martin Wood I saw, I guess when I was home. 99 was Dave Matthews. 97, I went to this at Vanderbilt when I was in high school. I saw Fish in 1995. I went to this with my dad. Van Halen and Alice in Chains. Aerosmith on the Pump Tour. And then like 89... First concert I ever saw, Bon Jovi, and then I saw Great White and Tesla on a double bill. I was a guitar player from like age 9, and so like my dad would take me to this stuff back when like metal was like,
Respectable.
yeah.
I just want to say my first concert was Coolio.
Oh my God, yeah, yeah. So when I was doing this, the reason I did it this way is because at the end of last year, at the end of 2013, I was doing another kind of like data thing where, I listen to music voraciously, but at the end of the year, once like the top 50 list comes out, you get to the point where you're like, oh my God, I haven't heard anything. And it was hard to prioritize what I hadn't heard. And I'd heard a lot of it, but I was like, people are putting out top 50 lists almost every day. If I can take them, put them in a database, and like figure out their ranking and kind of like cross-reference all these best ofs, I can actually prioritize my listening. And so I did this thing. So this is like based on the rankings of all the different lists, I came up with this. And these are separated by the number of lists they were on. Like this is just like the general rankings. And then this will tell me, compile basically, but it'll show me all the lists they were on and the place they had. So when I came here, what you kind of sense too is like in a lot of the lists, Yeezus was kind of like a consensus number 1, but when you compile them, it really wasn't, like Vampire Weekend. But I was able to so when I did this, like the first thing I did was download Queens of the Stone Age because I hadn't heard it. And then from there, I could kind of tell. And then once you get down to the outliers, these are just, pick and choose. Anyway, so these work good by themselves. And it was also, I was testing myself to like not use a framework, to not use WordPress, not use anything. And so I wrote some like library code where I would just have like a function called like make query. And that query would do like MySQLi, it would check the cache first. If you were doing an insert, it would blow out the cache. Basically, the least amount of code possible to use Memcached, to use MySQL, and to make these queries. But when I came to this, and I'm like, oh, now I want to do users, because something like this is pretty simple, where I had 3 database tables, one for artists, one for venues, one for events, which joins artists and venues and has a date. I then needed a 4th table that was going to join users with events. So once I got that idea, I was like, you know what, I can just take this kind of as is and drop it into WordPress in a subdomain on Hi for this. And the reason I chose to do that, without even having written it or having done anything, I knew it was going to be way easier because I got users for free from WordPress. Also, if I did multi-site, I got registration and activation for free. And I could actually, instead of trying to like create my own functions that did things that already existed, I could then lean on the WordPress database and cache. And it's actually, there was a middle ground where I was like, you know what, I should pull out all the utility functions I like in WordPress and put them in this other thing to where it's kind of like a subset, where it's kind of like a composer module or something where if I started a project, I could just have database, just have cache, just have HTTP, and like some maybe some formatting and sanitization functions. But instead of doing that, I was like, you know what, I'll just use WordPress and I'll just use another site in the network. And I actually wanted to get my hands dirty and use multi-site, so that way when 4.1 comes up and I'm working on multi-site, I'll have like direct experience, and I'll actually, be like, I was doing this. This is what I see as a typical use case, and this is a pain point, and I can kind of focus my work on that. So, so this is the main site, and then this is the sub-site, right? Minimal design, looks kind of similar to the other stuff I did, but what I can do here now, though, is I put my friend Seth in here, and so now I can go to Seth's. Actually, let me log in as him real quick. Actually, let's go back to here. Okay, so now I'm Seth, right? Me and Seth go to concerts together a lot, so if you look at his, they're all going to be the same as mine, basically. This is Seth looking at himself. And these are like his years, and all kind of stuff. If he comes and finds me, what I've done is, if we've gone to the same show together and he's marked it that way, it puts a check mark. If not, it has a little plus here. So, this is my way, this is my like app type feature of like letting people, once they've registered, come in. They can start, they can come in and add their own concert. So you come here and you're like, January 17th, 2008. The artist may already be there. Let's say it's this. And let's say the venue isn't. So I say, I can add the venue, city, state, and stuff. It's pretty minimal for right now. But just by deciding to use WordPress and deciding to use a user system, and I changed some code to put these user contexts in there. I didn't have to do much to my app, and I kind of inherited this entire user system, so it's pretty cool.
Is WordPress? I mean, is the front end stuff WordPress?
Yes.
Because I didn't know. I mean, I'm fairly ignorant about it. I mean, I really thought it was just a blog. I didn't know it supported things like putting data.
Well, so there's and this is a misconception. Like WordPress, kind of as a platform, to a lot of, especially developers, has to overcome. We're always fighting it, including at the New York Times. Is that WordPress is PHP code. It's a framework. The baseline implementation of WordPress, when you download it, if you did nothing, you can get a blog. What's funny though, if you go to like a lot of tutorials for a lot of frameworks, like CodeIgniter or some things, they'll show you how to make a blog, right? So like, and none of those things are like blogs by default. So what WordPress really is these concepts. If you're not doing multi-site, which most people aren't, the New York Times is multi-site. That's why the New York Times, at various incarnations, there's like 300 blogs in there. I think at its height it was serving 80 at a time, but it's one install, and you create these sites in the network. If you chose to make them all blogs, you have a network of blogs. If you chose to make them sites or verticals or whatever, the way that changes is really, you have requests, which means URLs. They get parsed, and then you display them. So by default, WordPress index.php, if you did nothing, is going to get your reverse cron most recent posts. if you change the default homepage to be like a page you created or something, you can query your own data, you can do whatever. Theming is really the front end of your site. But because it is WordPress, you get a lot of stuff for free. You get a template hierarchy so that if you just use WordPress conventions, then very quickly you can have pages routed to templates, etc. So the next piece I was going to show is, if you look at the URLs, these URLs, WordPress by default has no clue how to parse these. But these are like very much like URLs you might see in REST or like Ruby, like MVC type URLs. And I'll show you quickly. This is part of a thing called rewrite in WordPress, WP rewrite. By default, WordPress knows how to parse blog type URLs, which meaning that if you have slash, it's going to be home, obviously. If you have 2014, it's going to be a year archive. If you have 2014/10/7, it's going to be October 7th. It knows how to do those queries by default. If you want to do your own queries, your own rewrites and your own kind of mappings, really routes, it's actually pretty easy. So let me open this. So I came in this morning, and on the train I was like, man, because when I first did this, let's go back to this thing. If you notice, it's all query string based, right? And this kind of sucks for security, etc. WordPress, luckily, like there's some utility functions, so you could build a query string based app because they have a couple good functions called add query arg and remove query arg, which will intelligently look at the current request and add or remove and stuff. But this kind of sucks. You come over here, it can just get weird. If we go to, where is it? Here. So I wanted to do these like pretty permalinks, what they're called. But if you do these, you have to parse them and kind of provide these query bars. So WordPress is actually going to view this like it's slash. Like user and year are not reserved query words in WordPress. So we're going to come in here, and I don't know how familiar anybody is with WordPress as a code base, but it's very pluggable. The entire thing is like a plugin architecture where you do actions and filters mainly. And an action is kind of like you subscribe to an event, and then you can, on that event, do something. There's also priority. So like if the third argument here, I could actually run it at a certain time. So like if somebody else is running at 7, I can run at 9 or whatever. Filtering means somewhere in the code in WordPress core, there's going to be a value that you actually want to take and augment or change or remove stuff from, etc. So, I came in 10:30 this morning, and I was like, man, actually I want to make this rewrite based, because I don't want everybody to see these crazy query string stuff, and it's just kind of messy. And so pretty quickly I had it going. And the way I did that, query vars is an internal WordPress thing. I said these are the things I want to be able to parse out of URLs. And then this is really whitelisting stuff that WordPress goes, okay, we found this for you, and you can feel free to use it. But these are the rewrite rules. It's kind of hard to read right here. But basically, this is similar to how routes work. I'm like, all right, if it's user number, year number, then I'm going to set user ID and set concert year. If it's year, and this is like if it's a different user. If it's me, so you can actually have user-based where it's not you, it's somebody else. And you can go, this is for the currently logged in user. Instead of having to pass that user ID, we can just get the current session user's ID. So we have that. Same for like, I'm on this user and this is the artist I'm looking at. I'm on this user and this is all the artists, kind of etc. here. Then what's going to happen is, if you want to do a handler somewhere, you can hook into something called like parse request or init. And then in here I can do stuff like, if I'm looking for Connect ID, which is a piece of my app where you press the plus button and you want to associate yourself with an event, I can hook in right here, do my logic, and then do a redirect all kinds of stuff. Let me show you real quick. The good thing about, okay, so this is the example of how I wanted to like do all the SQL-based stuff, but I also wanted to have cache around it. Like you typically don't want to do this. You don't want to have your app mixing in a bunch of SQL queries. But because I was like doing that thing, I banged out pretty quick, and I was turning it into like a, a WordPress thing. I kept this stuff here. But basically, this query is going to get cached until like some action happens from this user that's going to change a last updated time, and then this will like passively invalidate. So like this query will actually most of the time come from the cache, and then occasionally, if it's been invalidated, it'll do the query again. But in here, because I exposed those query vars, then in my app, it's real easy just to be like get query var, If all equals this, I'm going to do this. If all equals, whatever. Previously, you had to do all kinds of stuff. Like you had to check to see if the get variable is there. And then if it is, you kind of need to sanitize it. And then, because you're going to be dumping this stuff almost directly into SQL. I also wanted a syntax to where I could do a query and I could do like sprintf type replacement and do the query caching. WordPress does have a thing called prepare, which you can pass in a statement and then pass in the extra arguments would be replacements within the query, and it'll do some sanitization for you. But anyways, like this get query var thing though is a good way to just like pull data kind of out of the request. Anyways, so that's kind of like the simplistic thing I did and shoved into WordPress. The way multi-site works too is actually what can happen is that as an administrator of a network, I'm going to have every site. So on the New York Times blogs, we have access to hundreds of blogs. What you can do though is that within my network, and let's say for High for This as a brand, I did like food or I did like nightlife or something. I could give an editor or somebody access to just those couple things, and in there my site still have just those. And so you can manage. Yeah, let's like this. Oh wait, I'm logged into Seth. Let me refresh this. Yeah, that's my buddy. So I'll log in as me. Okay. Yeah, so there's a network admin. So basically, you can create sites pretty easily. When you do subdomains, so if you notice, this is concerts.highforthis.com. You can set up wildcard DNS. So basically, your domain, and you can just add any number of subdomains, and it'll just work. Nginx, the same thing. You can just do your default server as whatever. But yeah, so a couple other things I'll just show you quick about like my High for This project, and also some stuff we've been working on in WordPress core for 4.0. Typically, what I do is let's take like Lana Del Rey had a new video come out for Ultraviolence. Let me see if the URL is still on my paste. Yeah. So one of the pieces I worked on for WordPress 4.0 and WordPress 3.9 is that the editor in WordPress is TinyMCE. I know the New York Times uses ICE, which I think is a plugin to it in some form or fashion. But we've been working on like these TinyMCE previews, which is where sort of like a what you see is what you get right when you paste this stuff in. So the way it works is that you can apply an editor style sheet to the editor, and I can say, this is my content or whatever. But previously, if you posted like a YouTube or something, you would just have the URL there. WordPress's magic, if you left it on its own line, on the front end would turn it into like a YouTube video. But on the back end, you wouldn't see that. On top of that, I actually parse what WordPress does. Instead of putting a bunch of YouTubes on the page, I actually put a placeholder image and I put my own play button and stuff. That way I can lazy load them with JavaScript. So what we did was, if you paste in those URLs now, they'll automatically get embedded and previewed. It's just the URL, but it knows how to read it. And then when you do that, you can actually edit this stuff too and see it here, all kinds of stuff. So a lot of what I do is I'll make posts like this, and this is another reason WordPress was the obvious choice for making this site. One, because it is basically blogging, but I can say, I'm going to put this in the watch this category. This is a video. Tag it Lana Del Rey. Publish this real quick. Okay. And then we come here, and she has unseated Sharon Bennett in the top spot. But, this is like, it looks kind of bloggy, and it is kind of bloggy, but this is like, I have like 5 different categories, and I'm showing different things. This is a sticky post. It's all things that are just baked into WordPress. And so it was the obvious choice for, and this is like some Instagram feed pictures and stuff. Another thing I do, I don't want to spend a lot of time blogging. I'm also not like much of a writer. A lot of what I'm doing is curating content and just putting up there to share. So I don't want to go to a bunch of different sites every day and have to like scroll through and find articles and see what's good. I actually want to come here. This is something I wrote. I want to pick kind of a destination, like let's say Brooklyn Vegan, and I want to read their RSS feed. And so this will show me the headlines and the picture of their RSS feed right now. And I might say like, oh, this looks pretty good. Maybe I want to post this. So I click show form, and then this already pre-fills this data for me. And so if this looks fine and I want to just post this, I would put it into a category and grab this data, and it would make a draft for me. The reason this was really easy to do, one, because it's easy to make plugins in WordPress, it's easy to make your own admin screens. WordPress bundles SimplePy, which is an RSS parser that you can basically, and there's actually a function I think called fetch feed. You pass it a URL and it returns an object that's the RSS feed. You can scroll through and stuff. You can also pass it an array of URLs, and actually it'll get them and sort them together and stuff. So this was like a quick way for me, to actually use the WordPress product, do the blogging stuff, but actually use the tools to like, build stuff for myself to make it easy. It's also a plugin called GigPress. If you go to this is where I put concerts I think you should go to. And then there's a bigger page here. I use this on my band's website as well, but it's a quick way to like put concerts in, and then like access them, view the history. You can see how many of these I recommended or what I've recommended in the past. But this is like an existing WordPress plugin I was using for that.
That using the same metadata as your concert list?
No.
Okay.
So the only reason I didn't is because it could, but what GigPress should do, WordPress has a concept of custom post types. Posts in WordPress are basically just objects, and it's the fields it's a bunch of fields, so that if you wanted to do a blog post or something that has like post modified, etc., like different metadata for it, it has enough fields in the database that the schema doesn't hardly ever have to change, right? Because like the thing about WordPress too is that it's backwards compatible, like numbers of years, and so you want to be able to launch WordPress 4.0, and somebody upgrading from WordPress 2.8 can like seamlessly use it. Or if there are some like database deltas, they can happen kind of like seamlessly. Custom post types are like, let's say I want to make an event custom post type. You can store the data in the same way that posts are stored, and you can use the same APIs to like retrieve the rows and stuff It also has baked in caching and validation and all that stuff. You're just responsible if you're making like an app type thing from getting it. I didn't want to do that because a lot of what I was doing is just joining existing things. So technically, I could have just used what I did. I could have done a GigPress instance on concerts, but what I wanted to do was actually create global tables. Another thing about WordPress multi-site is that Hi for this has 9 tables, and then there's global tables which are for users and for registrations and signups. If you make a second site, which Concerts is, it's going to make 9 more tables. It's going to make the tables for posts, for terms, for comments, and options. So if I were to make GigPress activated on Concerts, it would make a second set of GigPress tables. I wanted like GigPress in that instance to be global, kind of like users are. Users are shared across your entire network, and based on what capabilities they have per blog or site, that's whether they can access stuff or access the admin or do things. I wanted definitely the artists and venues and like the relationships to be network wide, and I didn't need as much functionality as GigPress has. Because GigPress is like, is it your tour? Or how are these shows related? Do they have posts attached to them and stuff? I just needed like these like raw data connections, and I also wanted to like make it as fast as possible, so that like WordPress is doing the least amount possible, and then when I'm doing this stuff, it's as fast as possible. Because a lot of it too is like I'm doing joins across like 3 or 4 tables. I just wanted it to be as like streamlined as possible. All right, so yeah, that's kind of my thing. So like, this is just like a brainstorm I've had, and I wanted to have kind of a music blog. I also want to like be actively working with WordPress as a product, and I want to actively be using these features. Also, music is such a huge part of my life. Like, it makes sense for me to have stuff like this. So the Concerts thing is really just kind of like an elaboration on that app I made, and like I'm gonna start getting some people to actually put their data in there and see how useful it is for people to do this. It needs more of like a flashier experience and like maybe some imagery, or like I can like, if you click on an artist, you can get like, I can fetch images based on them, or like if you want to find out more about an artist or something, or maybe some Spotify stuff. But it's weird because my first instinct when I was fidgeting on this was to do this, and then my second instinct was to pull some WordPress functionality out. But where I was actually most successful and most powerful was making a separate site and just leveraging WordPress. Yeah, so that's really the presentation. If anybody has any questions about anything.
Yeah, I've done a couple standalone projects, or not standalone rather. I've done things that I didn't want to be in WordPress, but I wanted to use little elements of WordPress, and I would do it by just in PHP just including WP config.
Yep.
Is there a better way of doing that that's maybe a little more lightweight?
What I would do, so WordPress basically has 3 things it does by default: bootstrapping, parses a query, and then loads templates. What I would do is let it parse the query, and basically I would like learn a little bit about rewrite and query parse, and then right before it's actually going to load your template, there's a filter for template include. There's also an action for template redirect, which basically means you can just load whatever you want. Like let it get all of its code, let it parse the request, and then do whatever you want.
So it's kind of flowing the other way. How long has the rewrite API been there?
That's been there for a while. Ever since if you've seen, the thing about WordPress too is that it's 22% of the top 10 million websites are on WordPress. So like, chances are if you see like /2014 / whatever, and then like you see a slug is like a sanitized title, it's probably WordPress. If you open up the source for any site and you see WP-content anywhere, it's WordPress. So as long as pretty permalinks have been around, which I think is 6 or 8 years, that there's been rewrite. So Yeah, I mean, for a long time, people were using it for blogs, and like a lot of companies would have their site, which would be some Java monolith or .NET monolith. They'd decide to do blogs, and they'd spin up WordPress. And then what happened at a lot of places is that they're like, well, we're using this. This is pretty easy to develop on. Why can't we use it for this other thing too? And they would gradually start using it for more stuff. And it's the point now, most major media companies in New York are using WordPress for almost everything. Or they're in the process of migrating from Drupal to WordPress. Condé Nast, The New Yorker just moved on to WordPress. Vogue is moving on to WordPress. They're kind of doing one thing at a time. Time just launched on WordPress. New York Observer is on WordPress. The Post is on WordPress. The Wall Street Journal uses WordPress. Just because for a lot of the things they're doing, you get everything for free. It's like you don't have to like reinvent how do we do archives, how do we do taxonomies, how do we get tag pages. Like it's already there. So from there, it's just kind of like your theming, which is your front end code for what your site looks like, or the way you're presenting this different content. That's the only difference, you know. So yeah, the New York Times, you know, the stuff we're doing is actually very bloggy, you know. So like, if you decide you didn't want blogs anymore, it's easy for a lot of people to say, oh, let's get rid of WordPress for everything. But for a lot of like projects where it may not make sense to throw a bunch of stuff in Scoop, or like Scoop doesn't have the flexibility to do it, there's like a lot of opportunity for WordPress to like spin up and do these kind of like special things or these verticals and stuff.
WordPress, it is said it was backward compatible, right?
Yeah.
Does not slow down the development for WordPress. Don't be able to use new things, or
So yes and no. It's every decision you make, you have to really think about. And there's a lot of people that have been working on it intensely for a number of years, and so they'll know the pitfalls. And like, probably like one of the weirder things is that the minimum install is PHP 5.2.4. Okay, it used to be like 4.0 something, right? So that was hell. You know, that was like 3 or 4 years ago, where you had to let PHP 4 had to work. It doesn't have to anymore, and so our only problems now are like, I spent a lot of time in 4.0 trying to get as much as possible compatible with Hack, which is the HHVM language, and Hack doesn't support global scope and like some other things, and so like you can get into some situations. It doesn't support top level code, so you can't have like a variable if it isn't inside of like a class or a function. That kind of stuff is going to be tough. That's going to be tough for everybody, you know. Hip hop runs PHP fine as long as you don't do like a handful of things. The backwards compatibility thing is a huge thing. It's a huge problem in some respects, but it's also like pretty cool that like of the 10 million websites that are running WordPress, everybody can upgrade kind of without thinking about it. WordPress in 3.7 or 8 introduced auto updating. So when a major release comes out, you know, if you're at least at 3.7, it happens automatically. You do nothing, and it kind of does it in the background. So like the idea is that, you know, it can be like Chrome. You won't even know what version you're on. We can just roll updates. It's actually been pretty cool. And the guys who work at WordPress.org have kind of been running that system, and they've had like millions. Actually, this is another crazy thing about the WordPress thing is so WordPress 3.9 came out in April. Download. Yeah, 33 million times been downloaded. Of that, you know, I don't know the number of auto updates, but I know it's been millions, and there's been 92 times there's been, I wouldn't say catastrophic error, but there's been error with the upgrade, and almost every time was a hosting issue on like a shared host or something. And on most of those, they were actually able to reach out to the person and resolve it, and it wasn't that big of a deal. So like, in that sense, the backwards compatibility thing is kind of like a feature of the whole project, you know. And like, yeah, I mean, there's sometimes you want to use some crazy PHP 5.5 thing, but do you really have to to get the job accomplished. Not always, we're not always every time building gigantic new features. A lot of times we're iterating on what's already there or cleaning up what's already there. So as long as you can get over that, it's actually not so bad. Cool.
Are you
Alright.
planning on taking your concert app and expanding it and making it public? So you can contribute yours now?
I mean, right now it's just like, I literally have done this in my spare time the past like 3 days, or like Sunday I did it or something, right? Sunday I did it, and then I was showing Eric, and then I messed it a little bit, and then I was like, oh, the WordPress thing. So I got into WordPress, and actually I had to make some changes to Hi for this to make it more like of a network type thing. Because when I made it, I had no intention of Hi for this being like a base theme, right? It was actually a child theme of 2011 theme. So I had to make like those. I had to make Hi for this kind of 2011 and Hi for this. That way, concerts could just extend it. That's a good thing too. Child theming, which is a lot of what NYT5 does. It's not called child theming, but it's like where you're looking for a certain template, and if it's not found, it goes up the chain to find it somewhere else. In NYT5, that happens in shared in whatever app you're in. That's like the essence of child theming. So like if a theme already exists and you just want to override it, you can just override the files you want in your child theme and say, this is my parent theme. It's going to look for you first. If you don't have it, it'll go up to your parent theme and get it. And then with some filtering and stuff, you could even do that hierarchy deeper. You could do grandparent or grand-grandparent themes or whatever.
Has WordPress become like massively bloated at this point because it's so entrenched? Meaning, if you just want to set up a simple site, would you advocate using it? Or
Yeah, so the thing is, it's actually for a random person. And the reason, like, because there's a million technologies out there, and I'm also into other things. I'm into, like, Ruby and Node, and, like, I actually want to spend a lot more time with Ruby. But the reason I always use it is because I started using it when I was freelancing. I had a full-time job, but, like, my job, I was at eMusic for a long time, was a Java monolith, and I was doing a lot of front-end programming. I was taking on a lot of side work, and I wasn't using WordPress at first. I was using Cake PHP, which is an MVC framework, and I started writing admin stuff, and I'm like, man, every time I'm doing this, I'm writing this admin code. So I was maintaining my own kind of CMS, my own like CRUD interfaces, and it sucked because it's not going to be as secure. You get to maintain it, like it's just not as good, right? And I had a client that mentioned you should use WordPress. So I did, and I was like, wait a second, this is way easier. And especially when you have the relationship with them where like you're going to build them administration stuff, and then you're going to leave, and they're going to update their site, right?
that automatically updates as WordPress updates?
Yeah, well, yeah, but it's also like, I'm going to build them a screen where they can do like these settings or like rearrange this or do whatever. They don't have to call me every time to make this some fidget, So like, you just get all that stuff for free. You get the user stuff free, you get security for free. Every time like stuff's released, every time there's vulnerabilities in the wild, like some of the top PHP developers and security experts on Earth are looking at this stuff. They've also been through the ringer. It's been a huge target for a long time. It's like Windows XP basically. So like, there's a lot of stuff baked into it without you ever thinking about it. That's going to sanitize or like SQL injection stuff, safe redirects, all kinds of things that you shouldn't have to think about every time you set up a project. Is just there. Cool. All right, thanks.